We are pleased to have, for the first time after the adoption of the STEP regulation, a presentation to outside stakeholders on this regulation. And we are having a specific presentation now of what it means for the GTF and in terms of opportunities. We will have a general informative session knowing that guidance is being prepared on STEP, and there will be additional presentations and workshops. We would also like to hear from you what type of modifications, eventual modifications of your programs you are planning to have. So this afternoon we will be Kadri Ostal, who is head of unit in charge of coordination in DG Regio, and myself, I'm team leader for sustainable growth in DG Regio unit dealing with smart and sustainable growth. In the next slide, yeah. So the agenda for this session is the first presentation of STEP in the GTF context. Then there will be practical tips for GTF reprogramming. That will be the presentation from Kadri. We will then have a 10 minutes Q&A session, and we will have a wrap-up. So I would like also for your interventions to give some housekeeping rules. So please, when you are going to speak, don't speak fast. Please speak clear and slow for the interpreters. I want to say also that interpretation is available via Interactio, and it's in 6 languages: English, German, French, Spanish, Czech, and Polish. And for the online audience, please ask your questions on Swapcard. And for the audience in the room, please raise your hand when you have questions or you want to intervene. So the STEPS brings new opportunities to accelerate the implementation of the Just Transition Fund. And there are 3 types of elements that are brought by the STEP regulation. The first one is the possibility to leverage additional investments into skills and strategic technologies. And this, we think, will offer possibilities to diversify the economy and reskill workers in areas affected by the transition. The second opportunity is the possibility to leverage other EU instruments to complement the GTF investment. And the third opportunity is to accelerate expenditure through increased co-financing and pre-financing. As an introduction, I also wanted to recall that the intervention logic remains. Yeah, there is no new GTF territory following the STEP regulation. The exclusions remain. So we have fossil fuel exclusion. We have exclusions related to nuclear and undertakings in difficulty. They all remain. The need to have a transition process at national level, as well as the need to have evidence of the impact at the level of the concerned territory remains. This means impacts in terms of social impacts, economic, demographic, environmental, or health. And we still need to show, of course, that the investments that we are supporting will contribute to alleviate these impacts. In particular, that they will contribute to reskilling of people and economic diversification. So in the presentation, we will aim at explaining changes to the GTF regulation that have been triggered by the STEP regulation. And in particular, the introduction of an additional specific objective. We aim at helping identify investments which are contributing to STEP, and explain flexibilities and new rules which have been introduced regarding productive investments in large enterprises. So, concerning the introduction of a new specific objective, we have in the GTF regulation the existing specific objective of the GTF, which is primarily to alleviate the negative socio-economic impacts of the transition in the GTF region. And the STEP regulation has added an additional specific objective, which is to contribute to the STEP objectives. What do we mean by STEP objectives? So STEP has two objectives. The first one is to support the development of manufacturing of critical technologies and their value chain. And the second one is to address the shortages of labor and skills necessary to those investments. What we mean in terms of critical technologies and sectors covered, there are three sectors which are covered by STEP. They are the digital technologies and deep tech innovation, clean and resource-efficient technologies, and biotechnologies. So this is one of the additions that has been introduced by the STEP regulation. The second addition is introduced by making rules easier for implementing productive investments in enterprises other than SMEs. So in practice, what does it mean? Because you have already adopted programs for GTF. So in case you want to to foresee additional investments which enter within the scope of STEP, you don't need to have a job gap analysis. So the requirement to have a job gap analysis at the level of the GTF territory is lifted if the investment enters in the STEP objectives. If it's outside STEP objectives, is still applicable, is requirement to have a job gap analysis. There is a second requirement which is included in the GTF regulation that has been lifted. In case your investment is within STEP objectives or contributes to STEP objectives, is the restrictions which are related to state aid rules related to A and C areas, which are designated in a regional aid map. So this requirement to focus the investment in A and C areas is lifted for STEP objectives. And the rules concerning the need to have an indicative list annexed to the territorial just transition plan remains, so it's still applicable. When it comes to this indicative list, and I have to say that this presentation is based also on a number of questions. I think we received around 200 questions related to implementation of STEP in general for cohesion policy, so we have gathered questions that you have asked and tried to answer them already here. So regarding the indicative list, what do you need to look at? When you already have an indicative list in your TGTP of investments in large enterprises, as this list is indicative, You don't need to update the list if you foresee additional investment in large enterprises, except if these investments are in C areas which are subject to paragraph 14 of the Regional Aid Guidelines, then you need to revise this list. If you don't have a list of planned operations, then of course, if you foresee new investments in large enterprises, then you need to revise the territorial transition plan and of course the program, and this should be adopted by the Commission with a decision adopting the program. So these are the rules, the two sets of rules where we wanted to inform you of the new provisions. And now I will give the floor to Kadri Ustal for the practical tips.
Thank you, Miriam. Well, Miriam has told you the what. And my job is to explain to you how you can use STEP in JTF. We have next week a full STEP webinar coming up for STEP in cohesion policy in all the aspects. So here today we talk about STEP in JTF, and it has some particular elements. So we can go to the next slide, and here I want to talk about the benefits, potentially, of setting up a STEP-dedicated priority in your program. JTF is a fund that already looks quite a lot like STEP, unlike the other funds, which probably, if they want to do STEP-related investment, they would need to reorganize quite a bit. In JTF programs, you would already have similar investments going on, and you're totally free to just continue doing them and not be disturbed by STEP. But there are some benefits to consider, and perhaps STEP could be interesting also for JTF programs. So first thing, in order to benefit from these STEP additional financing elements, a dedicated STEP priority needs to be established in the JTF program. You can do that by creating a new priority, or you take an existing one, which you look like is fully compatible with STEP. There is a guidance note coming up in early May, and you can compare. And you can repackage an existing JTF priority to become a STEP priority. But the contents need to be fully aligned with what STEP is about. That requires a program amendment and a tick box to say that these are the priorities which are the STEP-dedicated priorities. And it's an amendment that you will discuss with the Commission, and Commission adopts it. There is a tricky question in the 21-27 legislation. What about if we introduce something new to the program? When does eligibility start? And that is an important element to consider. When we look at the STEP regulation, it introduces some intervention fields. And normally, if you introduce new intervention fields into a program that are not there before, that is the start of the eligibility for those actions. However, since JTF is so compatible with STEP, it's quite likely that the program was anyway already doing things under intervention fields which fit the new STEP actions. And therefore, their eligibility would start from the time of adoption of the program, or whenever that intervention field under which it fits was introduced to the program. However, we still encourage you, if you establish a dedicated STEP priority, to also put in the STEP intervention fields for monitoring purposes. We will be asked many times after STEP has been implemented, where did the money go, what was done, how much? So having those intervention fields in the program will help with monitoring, but you don't need to worry about start of eligibility if the STEP actions fit under an intervention field that is already in the program before. Output indicators, which need to be put into a program, you will notice in the STEP regulation that those have been proposed and adopted for ERDF and Cohesion Fund, but we encourage that if they fit and they're suitable, you can borrow them and use them in the JTF dedicated priority as program-specific indicators, again, allowing us to monitor more easily. Okay, so that was what you have to do. Now, why would you be doing all of this? Because the STEP dedicated priority can have up to 100% of EU co-financing. And there is an added cherry on the top. There is a possibility to derogate from the midterm review. So that STEP priority doesn't have to have a midterm review. It doesn't need to have flexibility amounts. And if all the flexibility amount of that program is pooled into the new STEP dedicated priority, then the whole program can be exempted from the midterm review. There is no extra pre-financing that comes with the 100%, with the dedicated STEP priority, because we've already paid to all the JTF programs the extra 30% pre-financing. So the main benefit, as I see it, is the up to 100% co-financing. This is an element that is worth considering for those programs that feel they might have an absorption problem with JTF. We know such programs exist, because when you are using 100% of EU co-financing, you reduce the overall volume of investments, which is, of course, not very good, but you increase the absorption of the JTF funds. The 100% co-financing is at the level of the priority, so that means you don't need to put national co-financing. Of course, at the level of the project, you still need to look at state aid, and it is up to the member state to decide if at the level of the project, what the co-financing rate is. Now, if you think it's too much trouble going through program amendment, option 2 is totally fine. You won't get 100% co-financing, you won't be exempted from the midterm review, but you can extend your program, existing priorities, in order to do STEP investments. So eligibility has been widened a little bit, so that is an option as well. On the next slide, I'm still going on about the benefits. So the benefits also have a time dimension. The clock is ticking. On the right-hand side is the 31st of August deadline. For those amendments that are submitted by the 31st of August, they would benefit from a faster adoption deadline for these amendments. So Commission would have only 2 months, unless we send observations. But I suggest you discuss everything with us before, so that there is no need to send observations. There is the exemption from the midterm review for the STEP dedicated priorities themselves. And the whole program, as I said, could be exempted from the midterm review if all the flexibility amounts are pooled into the STEP dedicated priorities. So this applies for those amendments submitted by the end of August this year. However, at any time, until then and after, a program can establish a STEP dedicated priority and benefit from the up to 100% co-financing. So that one doesn't have a time limitation. On the next slide, as I mentioned, JTF got an extra boost of liquidity the moment that the STEP regulation was published. In the first week of March, we paid out 5.9 billion from JTF to all the JTF programs. They received 30% of pre-financing. This is good in several ways. One thing, it increases the liquidity of the program. So if they have arrangements to give pre-financing to projects, they can now more freely use that, and they will definitely not run out of money if a big bill starts to come from a project. but it also helps to alleviate our common worry of the N+3 deadline of JTF in 2025. That's now pretty much taken care of with this 30% pre-financing, and it helps to alleviate the end of 26 deadline for the overall use of the Next Generation EU funding source for the JTF. That has already been paid. It was one-off. It was notwithstanding establishment of STEP dedicated priorities or not. Second point, the bottom box, extremely important, and Commissioner especially asked me to make sure that everybody gets this message today. There has been a lot of talk of the spending profile, the commitment profile of JTF in our programs, and the fact that thanks to the front-loading of the Next Generation EU component, 70% of JTF funds in our programs need to be spent by the end of 26. We've heard that some people are afraid that their projects need to be delivered by the end of 26. I want to be very clear. The end of 26 deadline applies at the EU budget, Next Generation EU, JTF fund level. It does not apply to project level. So operations can, there is JTF in programs in 27, 28. The end of eligibility of 21, 27 programs is at the end of 2029. The projects can continue well after the end of 26. The end of 26 deadline does not, of Next Generation EU JTF funding source, does not apply at the level of projects. I hope that was very clear. One additional thing to mention, so the one-off pre-financing for JTF was done across the board. And here we have a difference with ERDF and Cohesion Fund, where additional pre-financing is paid when a dedicated priority is established. In JTF, we don't have that because we have the across-the-board 30%. It's done. When you establish a dedicated priority for STEP in JTF, there's no extra 30%. So everybody got the 30, it's done. We're done with pre-financing in JTF under STEP. Okay, moving on. One important element with STEP, given that it has a very central importance for the EU funding instruments, was the promise that the Commission made that all information about upcoming STEP funding opportunities will be visible in one place, so that project promoters can keep an eye on just one page to find out where the opportunities to funding are. This means that for all the STEP dedicated priorities, we will ask the managing authorities, they will be obliged by the regulation, to send information to the Commission of their planning of STEP calls. And on the day the call is published, they need to tell us, and we will update this information on the central STEP portal. So for those that have projects that are looking for funding, it's useful to make yourself familiar with the portal. This is quite a novelty for cohesion policy, because for the rest of cohesion policy, the information about calls is only visible member state by member state, and it's not pooled to one central place. So we're testing now if we can show in one place cohesion policy, but also all the other instruments that will be funding STEP projects. All of these calls will appear on one page. Next slide, please. And on the same page, we will also have projects which have been given the seal of the sovereignty seal by other instruments, by the directly managed instruments. So the projects will start appearing there probably by the end of the year. And those are the projects that JTF programs or ERDF and Cohesion Fund programs can consider for funding because they've already gone through a quality assessment. For the JTF, there is no automaticity, but the JTF programs can have a look at the projects with the sovereignty seal and see if they fit into the program, and then they can go through selection and be selected if they fit into the program. I think this concludes my main practical aspects about how to plan STEP in JTF, and we're happy to take questions.
So I think now we can take some questions from the audience. And Emma, will you tell us if there are questions on Swapcard? Yeah. Please raise your hand in case you have questions.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Maria Díaz, the Director General of Energy and Mining of the region of Asturias in the north of Spain. And I'm happy to hear that STEP is out there and it's to help us with the Just Transition Fund. As you know, we had been claiming for some tools to simplify the Just Transition Fund for months, I would say even for years. So we are very happy to see it coming out. And especially, I would like to remark that we are very happy listening to the fact that we don't have to have the projects finished by 2026. This is really very important for the regions. I assume the calls don't have to be closed by 2026, and this is really very good news for the regions. So I would like to say thank you to the Commission for this, to DG Regio, to the Commissioner too for the help and the support to the regions in this aspect. Now we only have one aspect remaining, which is the temporary crisis framework. As we still have the war, it would be very important to also make it longer so that the temporary crisis framework can apply longer than the ending time we have now, because we are notifying under this temporary framework, which is very good conditions also for the companies, as you know. So if we succeed also in that, in extending the temporary framework, it would be just the possibilities of the Just Transition Fund would increase for success in the regions. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I'm very happy you got the message for the projects. And of course, calls don't need to be closed by the end of 26 either. You can have running calls, you can have first come, first served, or different kinds of calls as you normally would up until the end of the eligibility period or slightly before that. I think I forgot my last slide. Maybe we can jump back there. And that was about the webinar we will have next week. Next week on Thursday. Miriam already mentioned, we received more than 200 questions from mostly managing authorities about how to implement STEP overall in cohesion policy. JTF will be included in that webinar, and we're just finalizing all the questions and answers because we got a lot. And we will be able to give a lot of practical information about how to manage with STEP in cohesion policy in that webinar. Anybody can web stream it.
Are there other questions from the room? We can finish. Well, I think we can finish here this session, maybe, if you don't have other questions. So thanks a lot for attending this session, and we looked at the opportunities that STEP can offer. Think about maybe projects you have already in the programs. As Kadri said, there might be already areas which are already covered in your programs, but you can take this opportunity of enhanced flexibilities that offers STEP and maybe reshuffle the investments in your program or include new investments. Thanks a lot, and we will stop here because we hardly hear ourselves.